Welcome back, everybody, from our break. Moving on to the next item, which is item number 12. 14. Why is it so odd? Why is okay?
Because
Everything's
your stretch break didn't have a paper.
so. Are we on the plan? The Planning Commission recently approved a cup for the Powers Creek Restoration
Yes,
Project.
that one.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Danny, would you like to go ahead and fill us in on this one?
All right. So recently, Powers Creek Restoration Project was issued a conditional use permit for restoring parts of Powers Creek in phases 1, 2, and 3. And one of the issues I would say that came up is that that the little pink polygon that you have on your map that's in this packet is where that's in the power plant property there. That's
Mhm.
where the proposed location for putting spoils is slated. As council, that's your property. You can choose to not have that use there if you choose not to. And there are alternative options for the spoils. That was just the most convenient one. So if you choose not to have it there, that's within your choices to make.
Does council have questions for staff?
Of course, a couple of them.
Okay, great.
Is that on the chip pile that's there?
It's right next to the chip
Okay.
pile.
And then do they put a barrier between the soil and the spoils coming in?
That's going to be a Gary question,
Okay.
probably.
And
And sorry.
how long would it be there? And if it's in rainy season, does it get tarped? And who would pay for that? And who pays to remove it?
Gary, are you the catch
Yeah,
this?
just waiting to be prompted.
Okay.
So yeah, no, those are all great questions. And really, this is an opportunity for the council to consider this proposal and decide whether you want the property used. And if you were to agree, these questions you're asking could be requirements or conditions that you place on the use of the city property. So, I believe members of Ottawa Watershed Council are in attendance and would like to discuss this proposal with you further and would be able to potentially answer some of these questions. Regarding winterization, yes, I mean, in the city's grading ordinance as well as other state regulations, there would be requirements to have erosion control and coverage and things of that nature to make sure that, sediment isn't running off the site and stuff like that. And there are currently some stormwater controls in place at the site, but probably haven't been maintained in years and would need to be, added to or improved and that type of thing. But anyway, I would probably encourage you to kind of lay out all your questions and then invite the applicant to address what they can. And if some of it's relevant to staff, I can attempt to address some as well.
Mhm.
So one of my questions is, what is the expected volume of the spoils? Sure. And just so that we can get some sort of a visual of what that means, do we have an estimated volume of the fuel pile that's currently on the site? And what percentage of that volume would the spoils occupy? I mean, we all have a sense of how big the fuel pile is, right?
Yeah,
So my thought is, how many thousands of cubic yards is that fuel pile, and
Yeah.
what is your spoils pile going to look like
I-
next to it?
So first of all, I want to say thank you all for including the dialogue and the opportunity to talk about it. At least I don't know the answer to the question about the fuels and the chips. That's outside my scope of expertise.
Okay.
But I can tell you that there are 3 phases to the project. And the first phase is from the Rancheria up about 1,707 linear feet upstream. And that first phase is about 28,000 cubic yards of material. And at this point, we had worked with the city planner and the previous city manager, and that had been something that was just, you guys can do this. And we were like, okay, great. So we're coming to a new situation where I haven't had time to answer the question about the fuels area, but I do know that our volume is 28,000 in the first phase. And then phase 2 and 3 is an additional 10,000. So about 38,000 cubic yards. Ultimately, over a period of 3 to 4 years, will be moved out of Powers Creek and somewhere. So that said, what I guess the question you want to know is what the footprint is of the soil that's going to be removed. Is that where we're focusing, or?
Well, I guess for me, I have no concept of what 28,000 cubic yards looks like.
Don?
Well, if we looked at it in terms of acre feet, we were talking 28,000. We would be looking at a less than 1 acre foot. So it'd be about an acre, about a foot deep. Or sorry, it would be actually more than 1 acre. Yeah, 2.5. Yeah, it would be more like 10 acres, sorry.
Okay, so it'd be 1 acre, 10 feet high.
Yeah.
So this is 8 feet.
Mhm.
So 1 acre, 10 feet high. So
Okay.
2 feet above my head.
For dump trucks, which is easy decision, 10-yard.
I know what a 10-yard dump truck looks like.
10-yard dump truck, you're talking 2,800, 10-yard dump truck. 2,800 times 10,
So,
28,000.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but Gary, the site has the ability to contain that without causing the chips to be part of that situation. The soil spoils will be separate from the pile of chips. Is that correct, Gary?
Yes, that was the idea. We weren't trying to mix those materials because if, obviously it was going to be reused, you would want those materials to be separate from each other.
Right. And so because I knew this meeting was coming up, I had conversations with other folks in the community who handle material, and Gary Johnston, who a majority of that material is coming from his property, has said that he can handle most of that material. That means reprocessing it and storing it. So there's another option on the table if the city decides that they don't want that. I think the previous decisions that were made before now were about possibly using some of that material to level out some of the industrial zone, or the area that was going to be developed between the distillery and the new pump track. So we just want to work with the city and give you what you need, but don't give you any problems.
I'm totally in favor of that.
I was gonna ask, what's the long-term plan? Like, once we have it there, is it just like use it when we can, or?
Yeah, I mean, there are some landowners along this bank on this side who we had done some field tours, and they were interested. And without a grading permit, you can use what is it, 50 cubic yards, and they could use that to level up their side of the creeks if they wanted to. So it would be available if the city wanted to allow that to happen for people to use. And then I've been talking with the Marias family about possibly using it in some of their areas if they want to level up some of their fields that puddle, as long as there's a delineation made for what is a wetland and what is not, because we don't want to put soil where there's a wetland. We want to do it all the right way. So that's the idea behind handling the excavated material.
I have a
Go ahead.
question, if I may.
Yeah.
First, your name. I didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Dave Sparrow. I
Okay.
announced that. And I'm the
Good, then, thank
founder
you.
of what was once Mad River Alliance. And then a
Mad
few
River.
years ago, our board decided to honor the name that the tribe had in the area. Or one of the names. There are many names of the river, which is something that we had partnered with them.
Okay. I'm wondering on the spoils themselves, do we anticipate the quality of the material? Is it like a mixed aggregate? Is it clay? Do we know like it's percolation type?
Yeah,
rating?
I think, well, Don did some samples of it. We do know that we will be required to do soil samples for hydrocarbons and
Mhm.
other background heavy metals and things like that before it's even moved. But Don, you did some samples with Cal Poly, right?
Yeah, I had a student, an engineering student from Cal Poly, and we collected.
You come up to the microphone, otherwise your words
on
are
up,
not
Don.
recorded.
Yeah, I'm Don Allen with the Ottawa Watershed Council. We did do 3 sediment samples on the city's reach, and it was a lot of fines in there. Like, I want to say, I don't remember the exact numbers, but 10 to 20% fines being like 1 millimeter or so in size. And then there was gravel and cobble in there, but it's a lot of fine material, which depending on what you're doing, would be suitable for some uses, like I could see where some people might not want the cobble. That can be processed. You can crush it, then, you know, make it into product. But it is possible. Pepe wasn't, Gary Johnson wasn't too interested in using it, or he wasn't sure. He said, you know, he thinks it was a lot of fines.
That was then.
That was
but
then.
Just last week, he said he loved it out.
Yeah, so things
yeah,
change over
things
time.
change, yeah.
Yeah. You know, and so I'm gonna suggest, you know, like a possible motion would be for a conditional disposal on Gary Johnson's property if he does not take it all, or a conditional disposal on the city's property if Pepe doesn't take it all, and that it would be weatherized, you know, through the winter, you know, erosion control, straw mulch and that kind of stuff and coir logs around the perimeter to make sure, you know, none of that sediment leaves the site. It's basically contained on site. So that would be an option that was actually suggested to me to suggest to you as one possible option, because we are under a bit of a time crunch. We've got, you know, less than a month to finalize the project, and then our funding ends, basically the program ends
For the planning part of
for the
it.
planning phase. Yeah.
We did just do a tour with California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Fisheries Restoration Program on June 2nd. And we had our whole crew out, and they had their whole crew out. In fact, some people came from out of town, and we were really happy with the meeting, the field tour. And at the end of it, a couple of people came up to us and said, we really want to fund this. So it felt good. We don't know if we'll get the funding, but it seems like since there's Prop 4 funding, that the funding is on the way. 2026 would be the year that we would begin. So we have time to still define how we want to handle the material. But we definitely wanted to do what works best for the city, for sure.
So a whole nother year before you start digging.
Yeah, we've got some time because the funding cycle, the way it goes is we applied April 17th. We just got our technical review in June. And we won't really know till November, probably, or even December, if we've been funded. It takes them that long to process all the attributes.
Is there any chance of contaminants being in the soil, and then
There
we'd be
are.
responsible for
Yeah,
them?
yeah. And the
Okay.
last thing we would want to do is introduce contaminants into the river or the creeks. So we're going to be testing it and making sure that it's handled appropriately. If that comes up, we'll stop all movement of soil on that one and then determine the best actions to take.
Okay. So basically, you would halt moving them,
Yeah.
the dirt there after contaminants are found.
Yeah.
So this soil, if there was an area that needed to be graded or contoured in some fashion, this soil would be appropriate for that, or really not?
Yeah, would it, you know, depending, like I said, you know, if we can't say for sure that all the soil would be the same as the 3 samples that we took. So that's, you know, 15 gallons worth of soil out of, you know, 28,000 cubic yards. So it's pretty minuscule amount, but we did find, you know, about 20% were fines. So, you know, if we assume that that same ratio applied, we'd have, you know, 5,600 cubic yards of fairly fine material, like sandy material, sandy silty material, which, you know, could have a lot of good uses. You know, gravel and cobble, that's maybe a little more difficult for people to use unless you're a gravel processor.
Yeah.
But
We're
the
really
fines.
hoping that Gary can reprocess as much right there on site. And then we're over excavating. So we are going to return some of the cobbles and some of the rough and coarse gravel for spawning areas. So I think we're introducing 26 large wood structures, and then there'll be spawning areas downstream of most of those.
And if there are local landowners that are able to take some of this, does the project transport it to that location?
I don't think that.
Well, I think
it
we
was-
have to, in our permits, and Gary can speak to this better than me, but we have to identify where the spoils are gonna go. And, you know, we can't place them in a wetland. That's probably like the main restriction. And then just financially, we can't afford to haul it too far. So that's why we're looking for, you know, a site as close to the project as possible.
Sure. Okay.
And then long term, if like hypothetically, I mean, how long would that dirt remain there after the fact? Would the city be responsible for getting rid of it, or would you guys
We
help out
wouldn't
with
want to
that?
leave anybody hanging. So, you know, as we're going down the road, we've been talking to State Coastal Conservancy, Wildlife Conservation Board, Cal Fish and Wildlife, and
Department of Water Resources.
Department of Water Resources. And all four of those agencies have interest and are vested in looking at this. We've been invited by Wildlife Conservation Board to formulate a pre-proposal, which would then lead to a proposal. Department of Water Resources is another funding. They were the funders for the planning, and they want to see us finish. They're really excited about implementing, so that we can find the money to deal with the issue. We can write that into those grants.
Great. Any other questions from council?
I would just say that I think that if we had a plan for for the soil, we'd love to have it, but and maybe a year from now we will. My concern would be that we complicate the problem we already have by putting it where you're proposing. We're trying to get rid of that fuel pile, and I think by bringing in that volume of soil, that could very easily complicate that problem. But I would be really happy to have it if we come up with a plan for that site that could use it there. And in my imagination, I'm a landscaper, so I've done a lot of that sort of thing, building up areas and contouring and developing flat properties into not flat properties. So I think about that, and my wheels are spinning. I'm thinking possibilities. And if we could come up with something like that, I'd love to have it.
Yeah, as a former farmer, I know how long those chips have been there, and I bet there's a lot of good soil underneath that.
I'm sure there is. Yes.
And you guys said you are on a time crunch right now to get this done.
We really need to bring the planning to completion so that the permitting agencies can know how to decide.
Mhm.
And if there was something that pleased the city in a way that it didn't impede the city's plans to get the chips out, and there could be a temporary approval of something that allowed us to put a certain volume there, because it's unknown right now how much can be processed. We do need a place to put some of it. If it was contingent on us assuring that we would find a solution within a certain period of time, and in that sort of reasoning, it seems like we would all get what we needed.
Mhm.
So trying to find that win-win solution for everybody would be ideal.
Am I hearing two different things, that one would be a place to put some of it temporarily?
Right.
And some would be to put it forever or forever ours?
Well, we want to find a home for our lovely spoils.
Okay.
I think that's the goal, is
Right.
to work with the local ranchers. Like I understand that, I don't know the name, but there's a rancher down at the bottom I just heard about the other day that's looking for something down at the bottom, but to haul that is going to be very pricey, right? So if we had identified a few places like this site and Pepe's site where the people who want it can come and arrange to get it, and we can write into our grant perhaps as we get implementation funding, which we know Prop 4 is right there, then we can facilitate that. But if we can't get to the finish line, we can't get the new chunk of money. It's a catch-22.
Yeah.
We'll also
And-
be sorting that material on site too, so it's not necessarily, we have limits on how much we can sort it, but as Dave said, we are going to reuse some of that, put it back in for spawning gravels, and that does require sorting it out into the size of spawning gravel that coho, salmon, and steelhead trout like to use. So, there will be some sorting, and it's possible that we could, filter out the fines and, like all the other larger rock to be processed by somebody like Eric Johnson.
Yeah, I would hope that maybe staff, or particularly Gary, could look at this, because all soils aren't created equal, and some will percolate well, others will compact well, and others will just be a problem forever. And, we'd hate for us to saddle ourselves with something that can't produce the results that we would hope for. But it's not for me to make that determination on what is or isn't useful to us. But is that something, Danny, Gary, do you think that staff might be able to look out and get sort of parameters of what might be usable to the city?
We really won't know until we go, because as many core samples as you take, that's only indicative of that area of the channel. And so basically we would know once we see exactly what comes out of the channel and how much gets put back in.
I'm coming from a different lens. I'm coming
Yeah.
from the lens of saying, if we were choosing soils, what might it look like? What parameters might that soil fall into? And then as samples come up, maybe that fits. And of course, I mean, we're not going to made to order soil delivery here. But at least we have a bit of an expectation of what we could.
And if you don't place
accept.
an order, it can't be filled, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and we know that
Yeah.
for the samples we took were further towards the confluence, further towards where the creek comes into the mat or the bottom. And the further up towards the culverts or towards Hatchery Road, maybe more coarser materials. But like Danny said, where and how many samples you get gives you a better and better vision of what's there. And we all know prior to 64, this was all alluvial floodplain with a mixture of large trees in it and probably some soil as well. But I would imagine over time, if you were to look at the profile of all of this, there's probably quite a bit of gravel in there. And I believe that we could probably put a lot of that to use locally. So I'm hoping we can, again, find that magic win-win solution tonight so that the city can at least allow us an opportunity to possibly use some of their landscape, and then we work out with other people like Pepe or maybe Kernan.
I was thinking Kernan.
Gary, do you want to weigh in at all? Any further?
Sure, only to maybe address what Kat was saying. That sure, we could provide some information, from our geology folks about, here's the types of materials that could come out of here, and here's their potential uses for city projects or just in general, things like that. But as everybody noted, you really don't know what you're going to get until you do your excavation, you see what there is. But we certainly can identify what potential uses could be for the different types of material. I do believe it's expected that most of the larger cobble and aggregate would be reused in the channel. And it's really mostly fine sand, things like that, that would be the spoils piles.
Great. Any further questions from council before we open up the public?
Just one more clarifying. So you're saying that as of now, Gary says he'll take all of it, but maybe he can't handle it all?
Last week when I heard that this was going to be on the agenda, I started to call around and find out what would be a solution, because I'm a solution-based person. And Gary said, I can take the material.
Okay.
So it's really identifying on his parcel, where would it go within his 500-year floodplain so that we're not in the 100-year floodplain, and identifying that site. I don't know how much room he has, and that's why I'm like, maybe it would be helpful if the city had the ability to take some of this material. Then we have our options available so that we're working with the best possible solution for the whole community.
So his floodplain designation is different than the power plant land, is that correct?
Gary?
I can answer that question.
There's a combination of mapped floodplain or designations, I should say, by FEMA, where he stores most of his aggregate and where he does his aggregate processing is in the 500-year floodplain, which there's no special requirements for being in there. Other parts of the property are in the 100-year floodplain or special flood hazard area. And there's limitations and analysis required if you're going to place fill in there, and that would just be costs that would have to be paid for by implementation funding. And the main thing is that if you're going to place fill in the 100-year floodplain, you look at any impacts of the base flood elevation. So you can design the placement of the fill in ways that really wouldn't have an impact, but that would be additional analysis that would need to occur in order to use that area.
And the power plant site is in the 100-year floodplain, is that correct?
Most of the area down there, what we're now calling the Powers Creek District, is in the 500-year floodplain because it is protected by the Mad River Levee.
Okay, thank you.
And I think when we wrote our grant to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife that we just had a tour on June 2nd about, we didn't know this was going to be something that came up, so that wasn't written into that grant. We could probably work with the granting agency if we are awarded the grant to amend the budget, but that's a whole other process. And or we could seek funds from, say, State Coastal Conservancy or another one of the agencies that has funding. However, that adds another layer to the cake, right? So ideally, if there's a way to find something that works for everyone.
Is there any way to get a confirmation from Gary that he's actually willing to take that on?
I'm here. I spoke with him. I don't know, other than we could call him right now. We could call
No,
him and pick up.
So you're saying you'd like something in
You'd
writing?
like
from
something
him?
I mean,
Yeah.
I would like some. I mean, it would help if there was some kind of guarantee in place or an MOU, something like that.
He's a handshake kind of
Yeah.
guy, right? I mean, I've worked on and off with him for years, and he seems to always fulfill the agreements that we have. So I don't feel like I wouldn't trust it.
And if I could add to that, landowner's property is going to be used for any aspect of this project has to sign landowner agreements. That's required for receiving funding. So that's kind of baked into the process.
We do have a 10-year access agreement with him signed, and I'm pretty sure we could get him to sign anything that we ask.
Well, I'm thinking about some different properties, just, I'm pasturing cattle on the other side of the river and thinking, oh, this spot here is not gonna be good for winter, but when I think about all that dirt, I'm like, oh, a piece of this could become suitable for winter pasture if, you know, we brought in a few dump truck loads.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
that's ideal,
so,
right?
I don't own the property, but I could talk to the landowner.
The
It's,
one caveat is that we would have to delineate it for wetlands. So we'd have to make sure there's no wetland plants. And since we're out of the coastal zone, I believe it's 3 parameter. Gary can correct me, but you look at the soils, you look at the hydrology, and you look at the plants, and you have to fulfill all 3 to be a wetland. Is that correct, Gary?
It is outside of coastal. You're using the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers 3 parameter wetland definition. So yeah, basically all of the agencies across the board, you can't place the spoils in delineated wetlands, sensitive habitat areas, things like that. And when you're identifying your spoils locations, you have to do some analysis to that effect. So something like the power plant site, doesn't really have sensitive habitat or wetlands. It's an industrial site. Much of Gary's site is the same way. It's a lot of cobble. It drains very well. It doesn't really develop wetlands. So that would be the lens at which, the applicant would be looking at potential spoils locations, areas where you don't have those environmental constraints.
Great. Do you guys mind if we open up to the public for comment? All right. Does the public wish to comment on? Yeah, thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Kent, this is a wonderful project. I strongly support us moving forward tonight in a way you can move forward as quick as we can because they are on time constraints. I think if you were to make a condition of approval to the thing, it would be that any spoils they did put on the city property would be removed in a timely manner at their cost. Just to let you know, a lot of your cost in materials is digging it up, putting it in a truck. To haul it and put it on a site and then pay Kernan $20 cubic yard later to pick that up and load it and haul it again makes no sense. So as long as you were going forward with them with just a caveat, a condition that if they do need to put anything on your property, which most likely they won't, that they will remove that at your demand or at your request within 90 days of being notified or something like that at their cost. That covers the city. We have no further cost. They move forward with their project. And again, I strongly support working with them, working with Supervisor Madrone. We want to hopefully have another phase here that puts Blue Lake back in the town there. And so I strongly support you enabling them to move forward with just a simple condition on their approval. And they can speak to whether they find that acceptable or not. I think they hopefully will.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
And I too had the opportunity to speak to you down by the creek and think it's a great project. My concern would be the city one more time getting into something that then if funding dries up or there's any kind of problem, we're left cleaning up something that's as tall as this building the ceiling in here and covers an entire acre possibly. So just to be really careful with the language in that to make sure that, I mean, we had promises of things being cleaned up before and now we're trying to figure out how to do it. So just to make sure the language reflects the true ability to be able to clean it up.
Great, thank you. Any other comment before we move up to Zoom? Yes, go ahead.
I've been thinking a lot about this project and I know quite a bit about it. And I said something similar to this at the planning commission meeting, which wasn't the right place to say it. I was told because they just deal with permitting. But there's a lot more sediment in the creek since last year, a lot more. So much came down. I don't know where it came from. That's another conversation because it's going to keep coming down. And that's the city's problem. It's not the Watershed Council's problem. It's our problem. As you all know, my place flooded and I live 2.5 blocks from the creek. I don't live on the creek. I didn't build my house on the creek. It was infrastructure failure at the end of Chardon, and because the creek was clogged just right down from there and down and down and down. I mean, it's totally choked. It's a completely neglected creek. It's a drainage for the watershed that comes up down from the hill. It's a flood hazard, and it's only getting worse. Flooding after 28 years, twice in 1 year. That's our sediment. It goes through our town. And this is a big project, but it's not really going to solve the problem of sediment coming in. So I think we just need to build it into our planning about how to deal with stuff that comes down through the creek and is a flood hazard. Essentially, it's a drainage right now. It's infrastructure for drainage from the water that comes down through town, and it's not working. And so it's been flooding. And what I'm hearing is you're kind of putting that on this project. And this project is what can I say? It's finite in that if they're going to come in, there's going to be this 10-year period, and then they're done. And then it's up to us. So like we have to start now thinking about how much catch up we have to do. And with the Watershed Council's help, support with this project, we'll get a big bump.
Thank you.
And then, so we have to come up with a solution about what to do with the debris that comes through there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other public comment?
Steve Madrone, both as a county supervisor, but also I've got a 40-year history in Powers Creek and working to restore it and stuff like that. And I'm really grateful to the Bottlewet Watershed Council. When Adeline and I were on the council together, I was doing projects here in town on Powers Creek. I like to call it Magical Powers Creek, but whatever, that's a different story. This is a great project. And the last speaker is correct. There's different elements of responsibility or opportunity, right? And you're lucky to have a group of people who have stepped up to try and work with your city planner, your city engineer and staff to come up with a project to actually increase flood retention. By taking all that out, you open up enough room in the creek to have more water before it spills down Chardon and everything else, right? So it has all those benefits. Will they last forever? No. These are ongoing things that you have to look at. And, is there erosion control needs upslope? For the most part, not, but naturally the streams are cutting into the hillsides over time and they're going to deliver materials. But this is a good one. And, I think one way to craft this, you got to remember there's this timeline. They're trying to wrap up a report within a month to be able to then go to the next phase and get the funding to actually implement all of it. So when you look at that timeline, one suggestion might be that ideally Pepe takes it all, right? Except for, as Gary said, a lot of the cobble that wants to go back in the stream for spawning habitat, right? And so what you end up with is a lot of fines, but he can process those and sell those and stuff. Those are of great value. Sandy, Sandy soils with a little bit of silt in there can be incredible for fill material where you're building. Or you could use certain soils for, agricultural purposes and stuff. But again, depending on where you end up taking it, getting those wetland clearances and other things creates another complication, and the hauling costs. So you might say something like, well, it'd be great if Pepe took it all, but if some of it needs to go on city property, we think that's a great opportunity for the city, because you may very well have fill needs out there in your industrial park where you're trying to get rid of the old Ultra Power and grade it smooth and flat, and do different things to make them attractable for economic development that your new committee is going to be working on and stuff. So I actually see it as a boon for the city that you have this opportunity where you might be at a place in a year or year and a half when they're doing this work to be able to say, gosh, we would like 10,000 yards of this kind of material that's coming out of here. And we're clear to put it there. So you could condition it where you say, if Pepe doesn't take it all, here are the conditions that we would need you to meet to put it on our property. And Gary can help you, you could direct staff to put that together for you. And then you're in a position to where you're only accepting it as if it's a benefit to you, and you've allowed them the 1 month timeline to get their project, to the entities that will consider funding. So just a suggestion.
Great, thank you.
Perfect
Perfect timing. I let it go just so everyone knew. All right, any other public comments? All right, Julie, go ahead.
Yep, Julie Christie. I have to thank staff for having Zoom. I wouldn't be able to participate with my schedule without it. I do know tonight your guys' decision is based off okaying storage on our public property there. Looking at the packet with the site map, there is another storage area outlined, just like Pepe's yard, adjacent to the current bridge from the arena. That area wasn't discussed very much this evening. I did caution the planning commission during their approval of the conditional use permit that they should be laying out some conditions in the way that stuff's not coming back to you guys. I feel like there was a lot of negligence with conditions within this project, giving the funding verification of it, which was flood mitigation and coho salmon restoration. I feel like we're falling short on those goals with doing this in the phased out project that we're doing it. Flood mitigation should have been the #1 priority, with a start to ending from the whole project site to mitigate floodwaters, to prepare for further projects of development next summer. We received funding back in like 2019 for like over 600 grand to be working on this. And then we get shoved to planning commission. They have to have a special meeting. They're not even ready for it. And now we are still having to work with it with you guys. So I do know there is an appeal process. I do know that we can have additional conditional use additions, but I think at this point in time, we need oversight on this project. I'd advise our council in the proper format to move forward with perhaps an ad hoc or some sort of oversight that is continuance with this project. And that would be my biggest advice for tonight. Also, the yardage stuff, I trust Pepe. He's got it. Like, use his advice and definitely resource materials. But I think we're going at this backwards, and we need to think about our flooding for next winter now, not later, and work with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for public comment. Seeing none, let's bring it back to council. Well,
I'm the liaison for the bottom up project. And if it is appropriate to form an ad hoc, I could be part of that. Just want to say that, but it seems like there's a lot of mitigation conversation, things that a lot of people are coming up with as far as solutions. And I think that it would be with those conditions, with those mitigations in place, I think that it would be appropriate for the spoils to be placed.
Your time is up,
I'm
Michelle.
done. Time to go. Anyway,
keep going.
I was just going to say I would be in favor of the storage and with the conditions that other people have spoken about.
Similarly, I think if Danny agreed in having staff, as in Gary, as Steve said, developing what would be acceptable, as in if it stayed there, we would be able to come up with a good use for it, not have to try to scramble to figure out what to do with it. And then have legal maybe come up with some terms as far as what happens if, what if we have this, or we have more than we can use, or if we are storing more with the understanding that it's going to move on. So just have legal kind of put something out. But I support it. I mean, it's great to get this moving along again and get it cleaned out. So
Yeah, we need
Elise?
support.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards that as well. So my understanding then is that we need to designate these areas right now so you can finish your process by the end of June. And then in the interim period of time between now or between the end of June and when you start construction, you could be identifying other potential sites and doing those water or wetland studies to see if some of those places could receive the spoils permanently. Is that a part of this? Or not
So,
really?
Yeah, I think what we're saying is the same thing, is we need to identify a place to put the spoils. We initially thought we had that answered. We wrote one grant. We're on the way to finishing one and getting another. We're gonna need a little time to write more grants, to write it into the implementation phase for the additional conditions. So that, I think, working with an ad hoc committee over the next year, I invite that. I think that's a great idea. I reached out to you the other day because I saw that your name was on the list for us. So, and I think I reached out to John as well because you're the alternate, I think. So I think that's the way to move forward. I do have to say, stepping back, looking at time from 2019 forward, we had different people leading the charge on that project, and we hit COVID as well. So there were a lot of stumbling blocks that we went through, and I think I want to apologize for my organization because we weren't stepping up to the plate enough with the city. We thought that we were, but now I understand the process needs to have more attention. So moving forward, under whatever conditions the city approves tonight or in the next little bit, I'm totally agreeable with that. I think that we want to do what everyone wants, and also to point out that we're here to help relieve the flood frequency and to improve the habitat for the creek. And that's really our goal and always been our goal.
What would the timeline be on mitigating the flood frequency? Because I think that's a concern of a lot of our citizens.
I know it would be nice to be able to get our permits. And I don't know if this is correct, Don, but I think if we get our permits, we may be able to work with agency to do at least some veg clearing this coming winter, which would be a big help as far as the willows downstream of that pedestrian ridge at the Norse Arena are what are basically choking the channel.
Okay.
And fortunately in 26, we're gonna rip it all out once the funding comes.
And is it going to be like a barren landscape down there after
It
that
will
happens?
look different. Like my first job with RCAA was with this guy in 2002 or 3, and I thought, yeah, I get to finally do restoration, and I thought I'd be like planting trees, and he hands me a chainsaw and says, "Go cut all those trees down." So but if you go to the Hammond Trail now and look at that site at Widow White Creek, it looks like a park with spruce trees thicker than my waist. And it's just beautiful. So that's what this is going to end up looking like. We have an incredible planting palette of over 20,000 native plants and 5 planting zones across 7.5 acres.
Awesome.
The landscape in 20 years is going to be a legacy that this whole room is going to be part of. The kitchen can get a little dirty. It gets dirty, but it's going to look great in about 10 years. But the first 4 or 5 are going to be, we'll be out there watering and weeding, And to look at the long term, I said this at the Planning Commission meeting. I began my first project as a high school student in 1983 in Sonoma County on Adobe Creek. And you can look that up. There, Google Miracle on Adobe Creek. We started a project as high school students. We didn't even know what the word restoration was. There are high school kids still working on that project. It's the only conservation hatchery run by high school students in the lower 48 states. And we have Rose Johannesson, one of our staff, reaching out to Blue Lake School, and they're going to develop a service learning project for the middle school kids. So that in hand with working with Karina, we're going to build and strengthen the community. And the goal is, just like when you're raising a child, is to grow that child up so they don't need you, so that I step away and there's Powers Creek stewards who are doing what needs to be done. So that's a long-term vision. We're going to handle that soil.
One question for you, Dave.
Yeah.
So what is the minimum that you would need from council tonight that would help you in this 1 month timeline?
I think it would be helpful if the council could find a way to identify a place where we could put spoils that Pepe can't handle, with a condition on it being managed for, you know, all the things that are required by the State Water Quality Control Board, and maybe a term limit and a way to tie us in as partners on managing that big pile of soil.
So, and that could be either the pile is there permanently or temporary.
I would say it's going to have to be temporary, because the goal is to, at least I understand, the goal is to get rid of the power plant and reset that area for some other development in the future, right? Does the city have a timeline on that development?
No,
We do
not
not.
right now.
So I think if we're in an ad hoc situation where we work with you, we're going to be writing the grants. And in the last grant, we were a co-sponsor with the city, and I would think that we could write that into the process, right? So does that answer your question? I think we don't want to see it set there forever. No one does. So,
Well, I think what I'm trying to determine is, for your purposes,
Yeah.
you need to be able to designate a site to your funders to say sites are designated.
forcible.
And they don't, and they're potential sites, but they're designated, but it doesn't necessarily commit us to accepting a certain amount of soil.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I have identified for the first phase 28,000 cubic yards,
Mhm.
and we will let our permitting agents know that we have a couple of sites to store spoils we cannot process. But we don't know that volume because we don't know how much we
Mhm.
can process and use. Does that sound correct? I mean, that's
Yeah,
as
and
close as we
over
can
the
get.
3 phases, we're gonna.
Come back up, Don.
I guess, you know what I'm trying to get at is,
Over the 3
what,
phases.
what
we're
can
gonna
we
have
provide
37,000
tonight
cubic
without
yards.
overcommitting ourselves, since we don't have legal here, since we haven't been able to do a greater review of all this?
Right, yeah, you want to make
Right.
sure that you're not committing to something that you can't deal with, and I agree. I
Yeah,
wouldn't wanna
but we
do
want to
that.
help you get, I mean, I think
Yeah,
everybody.
so I
Well,
think-
so yeah, the suggestion was to approve conditional disposal of whatever soil Pepe does not accept. And the condition would be that it would be weatherized, or erosion control would be installed on it for any wet season considerations.
With a timeline, maybe perhaps added to that, we could say with a
Yeah.
consultation with the council and the city's ad hoc group every 6 months to determine where is that going, or what is the city's plan. I don't know, I don't know how that part looks, but I think a timeline limit would be helpful for you, so that there is like, this isn't going to sit here forever, because we all know what happened with Ultra Power. They just left you guys hanging. We're not like that. We're in it for everybody.
Yeah.
For the whole community here.
So, I think, Steve, did you have some idea about language, or is that exactly what was just shared again here?
I kind of read what he
Yeah.
wrote.
Yeah.
I'm not professionally working with him, but we've worked together for a long time. Don and I for 50 years.
We started our careers in restoration on Powers Creek in 1983.
Literally. And Don and I have done over 200 or 300 stream restoration projects. One of the things we consistently see is this idea, like Dave said, on White Creek. When we started the project up there along the Hammond Trail in McKinleyville, the stream was completely choked and had very few conifers or, canopy, right? So with the question about what's the long-term plan for managing this sediment, because it's going to keep coming down. Well, a free-flowing stream manages its sediment and flushes it to the river. And then the guys out in the river manage it with cobble and gravel supplies and the rest of it. What happens is you get, because of the lack of tall canopy, in particular conifers, when you have almost all hardwoods, alder and willow, the sun comes in and it grows blackberry and Himalaya vine and coyote brush and all these small things that then want to drop in and choke this, create these log jams that then cause all the sediment to dump out. And then the stream wants to divert down Sharton and all these other low-lying slough areas that are down here below, the avenue here. So the proposal, as Dave said, is to, yeah, at first, they're gonna be ripping a lot of stuff out, because that's what you need to do to be able to take a entrenched channel and turn it into a channel that has a floodplain and it meanders and has point bars, as they call them and stuff. And then you replant it all, and a big part of that planting is conifers. And as those conifers grow up in 20 or 30 years, they shade out all that other stuff that is what's causing all the stuff to drop out in the system. So what we see with these streams is as 10, 20, 30 years with that canopy, you get open channels. And the stream just wants to move that material right on down. Some of it will sort because of the nature of hydraulics, but anyway, just wanted to give you that reference for, it is a long-term piece to the solution.
So it's that interim part where we
Correct.
have a plan. and
Correct,
we
because
need
they got
to
to
put
10
plans in
years,
there.
then this is good at 25 or 30, what's going on for another 10 after this 10, and these guys are gonna be working on it along with
With
that.
us, right?
Yes, with the stewards of Powers Creek, so, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, to answer your question, I think ideally if we could identify a couple of sites that if Epic can't take the material, we can say, we can place this here temporarily. The city can work with us to identify the uses. And once you've
Correct.
identified the uses and identified what you want, we get rid of what you don't want. And we
Ah,
write those
sounds good.
grants.
Anybody get
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
it.
Danny did. I would motion that.
What Dave said.
Oh, looks like we have a
Just make sure you're.
Place it temporarily.
Make sure you're.
Wake up.
Make sure.
Identify
I'm working on
I
a
don't know if I'm
motion
allowed
here.
to do that.
I'm working on a
and
motion right here. So,
use, and then
Go ahead.
remove.
I would move that we receive the spoils for storage in the industrial area for a term not to exceed 2 years. And agree that the Ottawa Watershed Council is responsible for removing what we are unable to use.
Can I just say the project will be phased in 26, 27, and 28. So can we go 3?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's optimistic.
That is optimistic.
Can we amend?
If you can go longer, that would be better.
Wow.
Make it a 5-year period.
Well,
Can we
I think
staff-
5 years is going to shoot us in the foot. I think that if we are at all successful in moving forward with any imaginings that we have for that property, 5 years is gonna blow it for us.
Sounds good to me.
So I think 3 years is probably,
Could I just suggest that that be 3 years from the time that material's placed there?
Yeah,
Mhm.
which would be
Mhm.
beginning in 26.
Yeah.
26, 27, 28. And we have an ad hoc committee if something needs to be amended.
Right.
So you could.
well, we don't have an ad hoc committee yet. We haven't
We have
set one.
We have a liaison.
we have liaisons.
Yes.
You want to add to that, something like if the city has a need or desire to change or amend this, we can have that dialogue to do it. So 3 years, 26.
So
27.
if the term needed to be shortened, how much time would you need? How much notice would you need that the soil needed to be removed?
I would think it would take us a year to identify funding and really get this, because it comes out of the funding cycle. Agencies don't move fast with funding. It takes a year from the time you apply to get the money in the bank. So I think if we were warned in 20, so if we start implementing in 26 and the city comes up with a project in 27, we would be pushing to find funding somewhere or an alternative way to do it, whatever's on that site, so that it can be moved by 27, and then we have an alternative site and everything for the next phase. See what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay.
The only reason I say that is we're not guaranteed the funding. We applied.
Right.
We got through the first phase with we got these restoration grants program. It's very competitive.
This is cart before the horse thinking all of this.
Right.
So that's
There is
why I
money
said
available and
kind of
we're working
depends
on
on when we start.
Yeah.
Wow.
But at this point, a 3-year would be sufficient at this point, and I would think that if we can have, if you want to add a caveat of, if there's some emergency or something that comes up, a plan that comes up that the city needs to act on, they can inform the nonprofit to begin turning the wheels, to begin moving that sediment or spoils faster than the agreed upon term, if you want to add that. Just so that the city has room to negotiate and mill, you know, I mean, that makes sense, right?
Sure. It just gets um
A little convoluted motion.
pretty
Yeah.
convoluted.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And we can make separate motions if that's what we need to do. And I mean, we don't have our attorney here tonight, but is this something that you guys would be bonded for that removal of any of the materials if it doesn't work out? I'm a little concerned. Oh, that's a, no, okay.
That's not generally, you don't get funded for that, and since we're relying on grants, yeah, even contingency is difficult to get
Mhm.
funded in grants, and you have to kind of write it in.
Mhm.
You can't spell it out as like 30% contingency.
Mhm.
You just have to kind of make your estimates so that they can handle contingencies.
Well, we could designate the sites for an as yet undetermined amount of materials for as yet undetermined amount of time. Would that still serve your purposes and allow us to revisit that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. How does that work for you guys? I'd rather have the flexibility. I'm just trying to get you guys on your way with this
Mhm.
I appreciate
without
that.
their
Thank you.
binding. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
Is that a motion?
Sure, let's call it a motion. I make a motion that the city accept these designated sites for the storage of an undetermined or as yet determined amount of materials to be stored for as yet an undetermined amount of time to receive spoils from the Powers Creek cleanup.
With conditions of mitigation, winterization, protection, all of that. I think that we've said it enough times,
Yeah.
probably. How does it sound so far, Danny?
So I have you have a motion for the city to accept the sites for receiving spoils from the restoration project with conditions for erosion control for an undetermined amount of time and an undetermined amount of volume. Is that correct?
Sorry, if I could just suggest, you might say a maximum, because the maximum we're looking at is 37,000 cubic yards
Mhm.
over 3 phases.
Okay.
And so you want us to state that we're willing to take all of it, but
Mm-mm.
you're thinking that Gary is gonna be your primary storage site, and we're only gonna take your overflow.
That's what we're thinking now. Yeah.
But you need somebody to put it in writing that they'll take all of it.
A year ago, we had originally been informed by our co-sponsor, the city, that they would take all of it. A few weeks ago, we were informed that that might not be the case. So we were hoping, you know, that Gary will take all of it.
Mhm.
He said he'll take all of it. He probably will. If I know Gary, he knows how to deal with that material. So, you know, I didn't have time to get something in writing like John suggested, but you know, we need a place that Gary can't take it. So I don't know what that volume is, but the max volume is 38,000 cubic yards by the end of the project, which would be 2028.
Mhm.
So the first phase, it's gonna be, what is it, 28,000, and then the next 2 phases, just another 10,000. So all of the material is gonna be handled by Gary. What he can't deal with needs to go somewhere.
Mhm.
The maximum amount that would be 38,000 cubic yards. So that what Don suggested is put a max on it, so that we don't bring in more material. We wouldn't do that, but I don't know. Was that a good? Is that a good
I think
plan?
I prefer the as yet undetermined amount of material because if we put in that maximum, if FAA says no and everybody else says no, and we kind of have made a motion that says that, well, we pretty much would take all of it up to this amount. That's an enormous amount of soil that we might not be able to do much with.
Can we revisit this and give you an exact amount in the near future so that we can facilitate this project, but also make sure that Pepe is going to be taking the materials?
We have until the end of the month.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I want to say right now to the city is, it has been pointed out that this is a project that's going to reduce flooding for your citizens. And I think that that's something.
Yeah, no.
We wouldn't have chosen to do this project if the city wasn't our partner.
I apologize. You know, just it's a short
No,
time frame, and we're trying to
yeah.
make it. We're trying to protect the city, but also you're
Yeah,
trying to protect the
it's-
city.
it's-
So
It's also something that is gonna benefit your city.
right.
And so if the city is not willing to take some of the material, I think that that's also the city saying we don't wanna help the situation. And I don't wanna put you guys in a situation where you have to do something. We're here to help deal with the situation because we're the nonprofit that partnered with the city to get
Right.
planning funds to do it. Now we're in a place where our implementation is being held back a little bit. But we do have till the end of September, or to the end of this month, I'm sorry, not September.
So on this map, there's the spot in the power plant site. There's the spot at the end of Monda Way that's outlined. There's a spot in Gary Johnson's area, and then there's a spot across Hatchery Road. Are those all just staging areas for equipment and other things, or were those identified as potential places for the spoils to be stored?
Those are
Most
just
of those
staging
spots
areas.
are for staging. The two that we're currently considering is Pepe's and the chip plant. Gary, do you want to speak to that? Because SHN developed some of those plans, and so I unfortunately we don't have an engineer tonight to talk about those details.
Yeah, I can address that. Those other ones, as noted on the map, are just temporary staging areas where they would have equipment and storage of other materials. That's where they'd be doing their sorting so they could get the cobble and other rock out for reuse as part of the design. But that would just be temporary staging areas during construction activity.
Thank you.
And just to confirm, and we couldn't do like a guaranteed percentage of the project. It's like all or nothing. It sounds like.
So for 10 years, the city has been the co-sponsor on this project since the very beginning. And it wasn't until just recently that there was a change in the way things were going to be handled. So I'm having to adjust here tonight to a situation that's kind of outside my control. I'd like to do the city a favor, and I'm asking for a favor from the city.
Great, thank you.
So I think the not to exceed 38,000 for a term not to exceed. Can we not to exceed 3 years, or we got to go longer? Is 3 years
Well,
okay?
3 years from the time it's placed.
3 years for the beginning of construction. Does that work?
What if we did 4 years total from now?
I'm hoping in a year from now we have other.
I'm confident that this is going to be used.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
sorry.
I know we have to make this official, but let's stamp on it.
All right.
Okay.
So are we ready? So we've got to. Are we
Let's
ready to
just-
move forward?
Let's just say, yeah, not to exceed 38,000.
Kat, you're not.
No, I'm not feeling it because that is a huge amount of material. And I am not against this project whatsoever. It's great. I don't need to be sold on conifers and removal of blackberries and how it's going to help with the floodwaters. Absolutely down for that. But our capacity to deal with that much soil. And if the other partner in this is Gary and he says no, then we have all of that, is kind of what we're saying tonight. I'm trying to get them what they need for their deadline this month, and allow our engineer to come up with some information and allow our attorney to come up with some information before we overcommit by way of motion. So I really want to help the Watershed Council get to where they need to be for this deadline. But there's still.
Well, I'm looking at the amount of, we have 22 acres out there. And even if we spread that out on 10 of those acres, what did we say? 10 acres, 1 foot?
1 foot backwards.
So that's right, I recalculated that, because that was off the top of my head. 17 acre feet is the total that we need over 3 phases. For all 30.
Now in 2020.
Right, for phase, that's phase one.
moved along. It's not like it's all gonna be piled there.
You won't see all of that material in 1 year.
Right. Anyway, I have a design for that property in my head and we'd use all of it. But that's just crazy me. But so I'm not worried about it.
So we did have the Kat's original motion. Did we have a second to that?
I don't think
You
so.
mean-
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just
I'll withdraw that motion and let you guys move on.
motions withdrawn then.
Thank you for recalling.
So, do we have a second?
I would move that we receive the spoils from the project for storage in the industrial area for a volume not to exceed 38,000 cubic yards for a term not to exceed 4 years from the start of construction. Sorry?
I second.
Okay.
We have comments.
We have a first and a second. Julie Christie, go ahead. Would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you, John. I didn't use all my time prior, hoping that you guys made a motion and we could chime back in. I'm feeling like we do need to move forward with good faith. However, I think you're giving this way too big of a window span. We have the right and ability to make conditions that this is under review annually. Dave spoke that funding is annually. I think we should be reviewing and checking in and renewing in good faith yearly. That keeps both parties responsible and liable. Like, we are donating the property and the liability of it, and they are donating through services and grants the restoration. However, look at the footprint that's going to be happening there with the bike park, where are these kids going to be getting in and out with their bikes. And so we have a lot of footprint stuff to look at as well, but I would keep this as a conditional use permit that's reviewed yearly. And that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
That's reasonable.
Great, thank you, Julie.
So is that the conditional use permit for the whole project or the soil storage? What are we talking about?
The motion you made with the yearly check-in would be an added friendly amendment to that.
Okay. So add to that then that this agreement will be reviewed annually.
Yeah.
For feasibility.
Yeah, that makes sense. That way we can check in about where we're at, what funding we need, and what partnerships we have.
Okay. Review for feasibility annually.
Do we need to second that?
Yeah, do you accept that amendment?
I accept your amendment.
We have a first and a second. We're going to get through this.
I think it's okay.
First and a second. Another call for public comment on the amendment. Seeing none, let's bring it back to council for vote. We have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
1 nay.
Yeah.
All right, so it passes 3-1.
I absolutely support the project. I think that we've gone too far down the road with the term, so no love lost on.
I can understand that. Yeah.
Thank you,
It's
appreciate
hard to plan. Planners have a hard life. There's always things that make it hard.
Thank you, everybody. All right, moving on to the next item. What was that? Thank you. Mine says 14, but that's funny. FY 25-26 budget discussion.
Budget. So in front of you, you have a fun little packet. We're gonna start with just the water and sewer for tonight because we're already at 8:19 here. Scott and I will be working through the weekend to bring you the rest of your budget before your next meeting. Basically, what's happening right now is that we are about $60,000 over budget for the water fund currently, and that is mostly due to the giant leaks we had on the boulevard, and so that's with the construction fees and staff and on call and everything, that put us about 60K over what we normally are at. And so for the budget for 25-26, we're estimating a little bit under what we came in at this year because we're not expecting to have a giant other leak in the same area, and most of the other infrastructure issues that could come up would not be quite that spendy. So that's where we're at with water fund. As far as sewer fund is concerned with the changes in costs of labor. We had to bring up on-call and rounds pay to parity with overtime. You're not allowed to underpay overtime activities. So that resulted in about a 120K. We still have an excess in that fund, so we're still on track with our budget for the sewer fund. Luckily, we haven't had any huge issues that require ginormous costly repairs with the sewer thing. So so we have avoided catastrophe there. And so we're looking at a projection, you know, roughly the same as last year's budget for the budget for sewer this year. Not a huge change from year to year here. If you had specific questions about any of the items on this, I just wanted to try and kind of keep it brief, show you where we're at now. This is not your budget in final form by any means. That's why this is just a discussion item. And just kind of wanted to like bring you up to speed with where we're at. And like I said, we'll have your complete package for you ahead of your next meeting.
Great.
So it looks like we're expecting to be running at a deficit for water and at a surplus for sewer.
Yes, and that's kind of typical just simply because water transmission and distribution and those things tend to be a little more costly. And when you throw in the leaks, then you just kind of skyrocket those figures. So we tried to strike a balance there. moving
So
forward.
how much, what was the cost of those leak repairs?
It was about $60,000.
Okay,
That was
so
so
did
that's
that,
in there.
Not total for that one, but over the entire last fiscal year, basically,
So
we
my-
spent 60 on repairs.
so my understanding is that when we have a repair that's in excess of $5,000,
We're
that,
gonna capitalize that.
Correct.
Working with Scott to capitalize some of
Okay.
these expenditures. So these numbers will change by the next time you see them. There's still some calculations we're doing, but this was basically getting labor pulled into there and like, you know, that accounting for increases in health insurance, that's under the, you know, employee benefits part on your expenditures.
Mhm.
We've accounted for changes in health insurance, risk management insurance, PG&E rates. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, you know, rates that we have to calculate into this that change and some of those are projections rather than totals because some of the bodies that give us these projections have not yet passed their budget for the fiscal year.
so you're gonna use capital improvement funds, but do we even have that much?
We have some to use for that, and we can pull from LAIF if we really, really, really need to.
LAIF?
LAIF we use kind of for contingencies. It's our investment fund, and that's what we use for money that we're not currently obligated to spend. It's sitting in a contingency fund earning interest,
Mhm.
so that our money is working for us instead of just sitting there.
So our operations numbers could look better once
we
take
get that
those expenses
capitalization
out of there.
factored in, yes.
Okay.
Yes, so this could look better the next time you see it. I just wanted to prepare you for, you know, this is what it looks like right now.
No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate the dialogue because you're explaining things that make a lot of sense. The one thing that is sticking out for me is that for the sewer fund, the employee benefits, we paid less than what was projected for our budget for employee benefits of expenditures. Instead of 121, we paid
112,
112.
yes. Part of that was because we lost an employee that was full-time and benefited, and that position was not filled. So that would account for some of it. And I think one of the employees had dropped in benefits because they'd reduced their hours potentially, if I remember correctly. But that's mostly attributed to one loss of staff that was not replaced.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it looks like we, and other expenses, repairs and maintenance, and contracted professional services, we kind of bid it on the water fund.
Yeah, yeah,
Technically.
unfortunately, that's where it goes. And those things are really kind of impossible to plan ahead for.
Yeah, you
You
can't
never
predict
know
that.
what you're gonna get until you get it.
Right.
Like if you watch home renovation shows, you don't know what's in those walls till you open the walls up and you find all sorts of surprises you didn't know existed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Since they're looking at water and sewer, and I think the rancheria is gonna be coming online with their own system here.
There's been changes to how their effluent meter is handled. So we previously charged them based fully on their use of water. And usually when you're doing water sewer billing, you're accounting that anything that's going in the taps is essentially going to go down the drains. Things that are exceptions to that are like summer watering rules and things like that. So, it's oftentimes municipalities will make adjustments saying, we know that you're not putting all that water down the drain because you're watering your lawn or your
Right.
garden or whatever. So we're going to cap that at your winter usage so that we know you're not putting it all in the drain. Right now, what's happening with Blue Lake Rancheria is that we're going to be metering their effluent. So because all of the water that they pull from the tap isn't necessarily going down the drain, but the typical calculations don't work quite as well for a commercial property of that scale. And so that's why we went with an effluent meter, so that we'll be billing them directly for their actual effluent charges rather than a guesstimation of water coming out of the system and into their taps.
So have they switched over off of our water system?
No, not.
Do you have a date
Are
for
we
them
allowed
to
to
do
talk
that?
about
I don't know that that's in the scope of this conversation.
Okay.
And I don't know the dates or anything of
Okay.
that nature for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any further questions? All right, does the public wish to speak on this item?
I really like what I just heard there about the effluent metering. This was a huge issue over in Glendale when they put in their sewer system. So 15, 20 years ago, there was a known sewage problem coming out of Larson Heights, the area up above the old mill site there where Royal Gold is, because of clay hard pans. So there was a lot of failing septic systems. And so they were forced by the water board to put in a sewer system because they're right above the rainy wells that provides all our drinking water for 80% of the county. But Fieldbrook Valley said no, thank you, because they knew that having a sewer system along with a water system would increase growth. And so they said no, thank you on the sewer system. But now what's happening in Fieldbrook is that if you buy a new property, almost all those old septic systems are failing because of extremely high water tables in the Fieldbrook Valley in the bottom. And so they're having to do Wisconsin mounds, and some people are being denied not to be able to build at all, which I believe is a take, but there's some weird things going on in this realm. But back to Glendale, when it first was installed, they've got 3 lift stations to take their sewage to Arcata. They got to lift it 3 times to get it to Arcata, which is going underwater with sea level rise. So that's a problem. And so what happened in Glendale was they were using the year-round water use to build them for sewer. And in Glendale, people grow a lot of gardens and orchards and all kinds of things. And so it wasn't fair. The sewer bill, separate from water, was $500 and $600 a month. Can you imagine your sewer bill
No.
being $500 or $600 a month? And so bottom line is they had to adjust that. I worked with the district board as well as the constituents there, and they ended up using March as an average flow in their case to try and determine what they should charge for sewer. But they're still paying $200 and $300 a month, which is a lot of money. There may be other solutions to that, but we can talk about that another day. But I applaud you for your efforts to try and provide a fair rate for sewage usage.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? None on Zoom? All right, moving back to council. Any
Okay.
further questions or comments? All right. Let's go ahead and move on to the next item.
Sweet.
That would be item number 16. HCSO animal control contract. Danny, would you like to fill us in on this one?
Mayor Pro Tem Scafani brought this up. I believe it was intended to be brought before, but it fell off my radar. And so we're bringing it to you now. The county sheriff's office has provided a contract to council for animal control services, which would be separate from what we already pay for, which is our animal shelter contributions. This would provide on call, basically, animal control services through the sheriff's office. And it's an annual contract, and the cost for fiscal year 25-26 would be about $9,500. And this is not currently budgeted for in this year's budget, but if this is approved, obviously we will add it to the budget for 25-26. And the contract does have a service period for the contract of July 1st, 25 to June 30th of 2029, which is when that would come up for renewal to a 5-year service period there, or 4-year service period, excuse me.
And I believe each year you would, there could be a cost adjustment. And so, and these contracts have a provision, 60-day written notice, they can be terminated by either party. So, so we're not obligated to do it until 2029. But as we currently don't have anybody on staff who is trained to be a dog catcher, and looking into going through the process of having somebody trained was very expensive. So this proposal at this price point, I feel, is extremely reasonable. And what it'll do currently, if somebody calls animal control and says, I got a loose dog in my yard, or some dog down the street just bit me, animal control, unless there is a active threat, when the call is made, they will not respond unless they go through City Hall first to get authorization to respond. So essentially, we don't have direct animal control services in town currently, and haven't for quite a few years. But if we do this, then anytime somebody needs help with an animal situation, they can call for help, and they can report dangerous situations. They can report, they can ask for animal control to come out and take a report of an incident, and animal control is able to respond directly. They can also come and enforce our ordinances in terms of licensing, leash laws, whatever we would ask them to help with. Currently, we don't have any enforcement. And as a city, we don't, even if we wanted to cite people for having a dog off lead or having a dog at large, we don't have a mechanism for collecting a fine or enforcing that. But if we contract with animal control, they are that mechanism. They can cite, and they can do the enforcement action.
Is this 24 hours?
Yes. And I think on the weekends they have pretty limited service, but like if there's a dangerous situation or an active threat,
They'll respond.
the sheriff's deputies will respond.
The sheriff's deputies or the dog catchers?
The deputies, because I don't believe that there's a dog catcher on duty all weekends, but I could be wrong about that.
So do we know what's the demand? What's the volume? And I know that there's been a history, but I don't know how we have been. Is there a way of tracking? Probably not incidents, unless you just took a poll of people around. But since we have not had any animal control, how busy are they going to be doing this?
Honestly, I don't know. And there are no records that we can refer to. I can share a couple of stories with you. About 2.5 years ago, somebody that we all know, Verta Pitts, her elderly dog was attacked in his backyard by a roaming dog, and it took her 3 days to get animal control out there to take a report. A few months later, one of our residents was attacked by 2 pit bulls down by the post office. He was down on the ground with 2 pit bulls on his throat, and somebody jumped out of a truck and got those dogs off of him. And the guy that helped him out got bit. And the gentleman on the ground was rather traumatized and injured by that situation. And after that situation, a number of people spoke about that situation and said, yeah, I've been worried about those dogs for weeks. I haven't been walking on that side of the street for a long time because of those dogs. Mm-hmm. And so my personal opinion of that situation is that if we had animal control at that time, and people felt like they could call somebody and report what they thought was a hazardous situation, that attack might have been avoided. And so to me, and discussing that situation later, after long after it happened, somebody came and spoke here. Somebody who works for public health came and told us that when somebody is bitten by dogs that cannot be shown to have been rabies vaccinated, they have to get the rabies vaccine, and that process costs about $20,000.
How
So
long have we not had animal control here?
decades.
Since we haven't had a police. 2008.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, since 2008. And I do want to point out, I just was reading over in part 2 on page 1 of the contract. It specifies that this service is going to include regular random control as available during normal hours of service for assigned animal control personnel. So this is not 24/7. This is during their normal service hours.
Thank you.
Does this help our insurance rates at all by having a dog? No.
No, we don't have any claims in the last 5 years against the city for animal control issues. I did look at that before this meeting. And as far as the call logs that I get from the sheriff, there's virtually all of the calls are disturbance type calls and not animal related calls. I think there's been probably 2 of those in the last 4 months that I looked at the records for.
And just to confirm, if we did have a dog issue, we could contact City Hall and then report it to you, and then you could contact the
Yeah,
sheriff?
under our current law enforcement contract, that things that are immediate threats are covered. So this would just kind of be an enhancement to that, basically, as far as I understand it.
What are your thoughts and recommendations?
I mean, personally, the anecdotal evidence suggests that that we would want to do something like this, but as far as like the stats on what I have available, doesn't suggest that there's really that great a need in the city to spend $10,000 a year on it. To Scafani's point, though, that it is much cheaper to pay for this than to hire our own dog catcher and try and train them. It is very much cheaper to go this route if we decide we need to have these services available.
And anytime that we do bring in animal control, we pay them by the hour.
Yes.
And that rate is significant.
And then on page 8, number 3, revenue for animal licenses, dog pound, and pound fees will not be included in the total net expenses since this revenue is charged by a jurisdiction for its with the residents. This is like per capita.
Right.
Yeah, we handle our own dog licensing. This just says that they would enforce that if people were not licensed. But it's usually enforcement of non-licensed dogs is complaint driven anyway. It's not usually something they go looking for.
Right. Okay.
And I will say that in my conversations with the director at the shelter, don't believe every call that's made to animal control gets captured in the sheriff's log, because people will call animal control specifically for an animal complaint, and then those calls were either authorized by City Hall or not authorized by City Hall. But I don't, unless there's an active ongoing threat where somebody says there's a dog that's got me pinned against a wall. If the dog wanders off, nobody comes. If there's an active ongoing threat, then 911 is triggered and somebody can respond to that. But
And
anyway.
just to clarify, sorry, this agreement doesn't have anything to do with our sheriff's agreement. It's completely separate.
This is a completely separate agreement.
It doesn't have anything to do with our contract right now.
Yeah,
that
no,
we have
nothing to do with
current.
law enforcement or the shelter. This is its own separate entity deal.
Do you have a number of how much we paid for animal control services in the last couple of years?
I don't have a number for that. I can try and find something though.
I don't have it either. I should have looked that up, but we will, when we do need services, we pay for it by the hour. And if we had this
Then it's already
arrangement,
covered.
it's all covered.
Mhm.
Except possibly for dangerous dog impounding and boarding. I think that might be separate still.
That's part of the shelter agreement. dangerous animal boarding and impounding. That's part of the shelter agreement, if I recall correctly.
And that's in our sheriff's contract.
That's a separate contract also. So there's a law enforcement
gotcha.
contract that is specifically law enforcement services for people. And then there's the animal shelter contract for our contributions to the shelter and its services. This was its own thing just for animal control personnel to come to the city to enforce animal control issues.
It's like a little a la carte.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the dangerous dog thing is separate even then. It's under our shelter agreement, but I think we get charged extra for that. So again, if we can avoid a bite, if by enforcement we can make the situation here safer, we can avoid a bite situation, the dog doesn't end up getting impounded and and in a rabies quarantine situation.
Right.
So
Any
anyway.
further questions before we open up to public? I'd like to get some public feedback on this one. Yes, go ahead.
Becca Collins. I've been in several instances with pit bulls out on the levee. Several times, Bob's almost had to pull out and use his mace on him. We were down walking our little dogs. I have a little Yorkie, and this guy comes out with a great big Rottweiler and lets it loose. Oh, and they always tell you, he's really friendly. He won't hurt your dogs. And I always say to him, until he does. They're really friendly until they're not. And it's like we never know who to call. I mean, who do you call? I didn't know we could call the city and have them do something about it. And it just seems like since the leash laws come up and been there, more people for a while were really good about it. And then we were down, come across the river, and this guy wasn't from here, and he had two great big laps in his truck. And he had this funky collar on it, and it pulled loose, and it took off right for our golden retriever. And Bob stepped between them, and the guy started screaming, and he turned his back, and I thought he's gonna get bit, and the lady called the dog off. But I mean, people come out here and bring their dogs to walk on our trails that aren't in our city. And there's nobody to call. So I think it's a good thing that we have somebody that we can call.
Great.
Get dogs taken care of that don't abide by laws.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Pretend I'm Nona, and Nona would say a great idea. I think if you were to get your facts and figures from your city manager, we get, I'm just guessing it was 185 maybe or $190,000 from the state for law enforcement each year. We're spending 170 of that with the sheriff. That leaves this additional amount, and I think it's your best insurance policy you can have. I deal quite a bit with insurance and claims, and when you do your best due diligence, if somebody gets bit, say, well, we did everything we could. You can't do any more than that. And if you're coming up short of that, then it would be questionable. A good lawyer could probably say, well, you could have done this. Why didn't you? It might have prevented this. And so you could be subject to a claim through your insurance company. So I'm just guessing if you were to reach out to your insurance company, they would strongly endorse the fact, even though they haven't had a claim, fortunately, in 5 years, I'm aware of 2 or 3 people that could have claimed and probably should have claimed because of not having that protection. It's a very cheap insurance policy as far as that goes. Strongly recommend, and Nona would recommend that you go ahead and move forward with that. That's why I'm speaking on this topic.
Thank you.
And I think it's worth noting that our supplemental law enforcement services grant paid us $177,000 last year. And
We're in public.
I know. Doesn't mean I can't say something.
Sure,
Does it?
go ahead.
I can
finish up.
wait. Well,
Well,
we have an extra $20,000
okay.
that we didn't
Yes,
have last
public
year.
comments.
Thank you.
I have a question and a couple comments.
Sure.
Do you have your own dog ordinance in Blue Lake? Or are you using the county's dog ordinance if you do this contract?
We currently have our own ordinance on the
You have your own
books.
ordinance, okay?
Yeah.
Well, a point was just brought up that you can be walking past the Mad River Brewery and you can go out onto the levee to the west. And I forget where the city boundaries are, but I believe that part of the levee is in the city. If you turn and go east, that's in the county. City levy, county levy. Dogs, they don't see the boundary. And so what happens is enforcement becomes really difficult if the ordinances are different. And the deputies are put in a tough position, if that's who you call, to figure out where the city boundary is and what ordinance they're enforcing. So thanks for answering the question. And the comments are that I'm working with the city of Trinidad and the county sheriff's department and some other interested citizens from McKinleyville. And I would like to offer the invite to, if you want to have a representative from Blue Lake join us, we're forming an ad hoc committee to look at our county ordinance, which is woefully old. For instance, under leash law. So what we've done is we're comparing up in Trinidad, we've got Trinidad, the Rancheria, BLM, state parks, and the county, all within, this little bitty area. And you go down to State Beach, you're on state property. And a lot of people love to let their dogs loose on State Beach. Oh, he's a friendly one. You can run it up into your face or whatever. The best prevention of avoiding a bite is a leash. The county's leash law says must be under voice command.
Oh,
Unless you're at the airport or a park or around preschools or very few places where you have to have them on a leash. So it's not a leash law. It's a voice control law. And there are other problems. For instance, when those dogs were impounded here, I think they had something to do with the bites that happened in Trinidad before that, previous. So it was known dangerous dogs. They got impounded, they got cleared for rabies, then they got let go even before the court hearing happened, which is required to determine are these dangerous animals that need to be put down, which is a horrible thing to do because probably the animals at some point in their lives were probably just sweet little puppies. And then they became something else. And it's not just breed, it is breeding, it is, the owners. So I just want to say we're working to try and see if we might be able to get these ordinances all kind of lined up. And if you would be interested in joining us, we'd glad to have you. It might make a lot of sense in here with your different boundaries. So I just wanted to make that offer and give you that update because it is really old. It needs update on numerous items. And the sheriff has said, yeah, let's do it. So I'm working with one of his people and other volunteers. So
thank you.
Great, thank you.
if you're interested, contact me.
Great, thanks.
Sorry.
Yes, Adeline, go ahead.
Adeline Jones, thank you for that offer, Supervisor Madrone. We also had a law in Blue Lake that was the dogs should be under the command of their owners. And I believe it was last year we were able to finally codify a leash law in town. I think what we need, and that was a curious instance where, we have to remember that Blue Lake is just less than 1 square mile. So we're talking about a small area. But anyway, I think one thing we should think about is signage because as the summer approaches, the people are coming with their animals and they're on the levee. And I think some of this money should maybe be used for that rather than for the animal control. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie Christie, go ahead.
Yep, you guys, long night. Our prior speaker, being mayor at the time, and we were going through our dog leash law that actually we had to, that took a lot of community effort, you guys, and it did for the justification for the fact that we can't really necessarily enforce it, but it's the realistic idea that once that ordinance is in place, if somebody does have an incident, at least they have a little bit of accountability as a dog owner potentially. I was the one promoting every meeting for signage. It never happened. I would still love to see, we only have one way in town and one way at the bridge, that we do have, like I said in the past, signage at those areas. If you are a leash law city, at least you guys are clear in liability doing that. I do support getting on with the sheriff's animal control contract. Yes, I agree we should be a little more unilateral with that. But you guys, this is not funny. And the time I talked to you last, cleaning stalls, busting my butt by myself, I have my over $10,000 donkey freaking out next to me as a little pit bull is chasing him. I proceed to get my rifle because it's my only line of defense in a situation like this. yell at the dog. Thank God my verbal intercussion got that dog to run to my sister's house, which is not a safe place. Luckily, we were able to get the dog into a kennel, and we are proceeding to call the sheriff's department. So I know I'm right across the bridge from town, but it's just something that we need the protection for the animals and accountability. I've never received a penny in my lifetime for the loss I've received on my livestock, but I always aspire to get that animal home safe and in responsible hands. That's step one. So whatever we can do to support the sheriffs, I think is important. I would like to get a little comment on us being more advocates at our budgeting period during the supervisors, that we can advocate more heavily for this funding so that it's not such a burden on their department for staff and not such a burden on us as a municipality to then apply. We need to get in the neuter scooter and public vet. I've talked to Elise about this in the past. We have venues here in town that could accommodate having neuter scooter or public vet come in doing free spays and neuters. We have amazing trainers in our community that can come in and do workshops. But yeah, my heart's a little pumping tonight, you guys, but everything ended on a good note. And I think if we move forward with this, it'll end on a good note too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Becky, go ahead.
I just want to say, I think that you've always been paying for, of course, the animal control, and the signs are there, but like Julie said, they're very limited. I do agree with what she has to say. For the most part, it's, you know, we really fought hard for that leash law when this happened to our friend, and we really pushed it hard to get that through, and we were glad that we did. We do need a little bit more signage up, like Julie said, and, you know, just keep up the good work. And, you know, if we got to pay for it to get that extra help, it's always nice to have. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And go ahead and bring that signage request to the Public Safety Commission and have them start reviewing it potentially as the public. All right. Any other comments? Yes, Justin, go ahead.
I'd just like to say I'm not against this ordinance or paying for them. I would just ask if you could clarify with staff how much money has been spent and compare, you know, I'm a numbers guy. I like numbers. I like understanding what we're paying for, making sure we're getting value for what we're paying for. And also just finding out, you know, what's the cost of this versus not doing this. And I would think, I would hope you guys would wait until you find that out for sure, and also whether or not you truly do have the money that you can use, that you've been overpaid or that you have left over for law enforcement services. I would make sure you confirm that that money can be used before you actually go through with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Any further public comment? Seeing none, let's bring it back to council for consideration.
I would like to share, I totally agree with Justin and like the numbers and the value thing. I was shocked when I learned that it cost $20,000 to get the rabies vaccines if you get bitten by a dog that's not been vaccinated. Absolutely shocked. I also want to bring up the trauma that somebody goes through when they get bit. And I think that if you asked any of those people if they think we should spend less than $10,000 on animal control per year, they would look at you and say, "Are you stupid? Why are you asking me that? Of course you should spend that money. Absolutely you should spend that money. If it was ever you that got bit, if it was your family member, if it was your child, if it was your dog, you would say, absolutely. Why are you guys pinching pennies on safety? This is a silly question." So excuse me if I'm a little extra passionate about this, but I've been working towards animal safety in this town for 3 years, and I can't imagine saying anything but yes to this proposal. Just can't imagine it. I've been bitten. I went 9 years as a UPS driver without getting bitten. And when I got nailed, it changed me. It changed me for a while. I got over it. It was a few months, right? But I did eventually get over it, but I wasn't down on the ground with pit bulls on my throat like our friend down the road. You know, I'm getting emotional just talking about this. Nobody should ever have to go through that for any reason that isn't even remotely preventable. And if we don't say yes to this, we're saying no to making this town as safe as we can make it.
Elise, I,
Go, go.
I appreciate your passion. I really, really do. I think that, you know, everything that you're saying is valid. What I'm seeing in this contract does not guarantee that people are not going to have encounters with animals that are loose. It's not like a protective magic wall up. It does provide
Right.
some options. We don't have 24-hour service. We don't have weekend service. Lots of times weekends are when people are out and about with their dogs. I understand exactly what you're saying. I'm not saying that I'm opposed to it. I do want to get a little bit more information about this. And if it was possible to possibly enhance the contract and the services provided a little bit, because it doesn't seem, I mean, it just seems like, you know, oh, darn it, oh, it's 501 or, you know, whatever. I mean, this seems to happen sometimes. And I understand that maybe there's going to be somebody who's going to be available and maybe they're going to respond, but I would like to see a more robust protective mechanism in place from this service that we are paying for. And I'm not complaining about the amount. I'm complaining about the level of service, honestly, because so I would like some more information, look at other options as far as that. I appreciate all the work that you've done and your concerns, because they're absolutely 100% valid. It's horrifying. Out of control dog or anybody getting injured and another animal, whatever. I completely agree. I would just like to see and explore some other possibilities, or look at our numbers. Maybe it's not going to make any difference, and maybe we can't get anything extra, or maybe we can't get any extra service hours, or maybe we can't have that after hours hotline. Because if it is after hours, if it's a Saturday, then we're calling the sheriff anyway, right?
Well, they have one animal control officer, I believe, on Saturdays.
And they may or may not be available.
Right. Well, they serve the whole county. And so right now we have no animal control services within the city unless we pay per event. This gives us the same animal control services within the city that exist outside in the county areas. So, so it's the service that the county provides to all unincorporated areas, and we would be getting it within the city.
Danny, could you get us a per event cost? Not right now, obviously, but like maybe if we continue this conversation past this point. Pat, would you go ahead and comment on this item? Do you have any comments?
You know, there's a 60-day notice to cancel. So, you know, it's not like you're locked in for 4 years. And I think I definitely would prefer to have something than the nothing that we currently have. That said, this wouldn't go into action until the next year's budget anyway.
It would go in, it would
possibly, but this
start
way,
July 1st if we
and we could
adopt it
take
now.
this up. If it's like, it sounds like you're looking for a little bit more information to possibly expand the services. I just want to be clear on what we would have at night. You know, like, what's the actual process? You know, what's the number that we call? What might be the general range of expectation? So that would be something to have maybe a little more detail on.
And then the number of events, our data, yes, again.
Well, I can tell you that there's been very.
I'd like to finish my comment if I
Sorry.
may,
Sure,
please,
yes,
guys.
please go ahead.
So for me, it's not a matter of the number of events. It only takes one event to take a life, a small child or pet. And that's just not something that I want to turn my back on. So I'd like to see something like this, but if we just need to revisit this in a couple of weeks with a little more information, I'd be happy to do that. That's my 2 cents.
So what does the council feel at this point? Do we feel like voting on, or at least go ahead, I'll let you finish.
Well, I feel like we could go forward with it and try to fine tune it over time. I don't, we can ask, an animal control officer to, well, I would ask the director of the shelter to address some of your concerns, but I have spoken with her in the past and we talked about, targeted enforcement of, leash law and whatnot. And, and again, if somebody has a problem with the dog, if they have a concern about a dog, the animal control will come out and investigate those concerns. And ultimately, hopefully, avoid hazardous problems.
Great.
But that's what
So
I just
you guys
want to
want
reiterate that having this in place is not the magic protective
I'm no pre-
mechanism at all. I
I'm
mean,
not saying it's magic. It's something as opposed to nothing.
that being said, we need to take a responsibility as a city to make sure that we're communicating very clearly with our lovely city, and we're making sure. I like the signage idea. I think that's fantastic. We need to be messaging that. We need to share that widely, and I'll take responsibility for that because this, again, is not always going to be able to help.
Danny, is there, apologies.
No, that's it.
Is there any issue, Danny, with us just tabling this
Not
till
at
we
all.
get more
You can
information
table it
and
till
then?
the next meeting if you like.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
I'm-
no time sensitive nature to
Right.
this. Once you decide whether or not you want to have the contract, it goes to the Board of Supervisors for ratification, and then services start as soon as it's ratified. So it's, there's not like some looming threat that it has to be done tonight.
I don't want to. I don't want to put it off long. I just want to think about it a little bit longer. I want to read this contract. It's pretty dense.
It's the same as our law enforcement, almost word for word.
Okay. Well, anyway, I just need a little more time.
Does the council want to entertain a motion or direction?
So I guess it sounds like we might be wanting to ask staff to bring this back to the next regularly scheduled council meeting to revisit. That will give us a little over 2 weeks, or about 2 weeks.
Yes.
With some more.
I think if we're gonna do that, we should make a list of, questions we want answered. And we can make sure we get those answers.
Can we go to Danny later? Not at this meeting, or do we need to ask the questions now?
If you guys have questions, you can send them to me and then I will come, get the answers together and then blind copy all of you so you can see the answers without having serial communications.
Great.
And then maybe asking the public if there's any specific questions they have. Because had we already done public comment on this? I think
We did do public comment.
did.
Yes.
It's been a long night.
Yeah. Time to keep moving. All right. So can we get a motion?
To bring it back. That's
You don't need a
staff
motion for
direction.
that.
Okay.
It's just a direction to bring
Yeah.
it back. You
Great.
guys are not going to take action at this time.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
And that was the end of your thing. So an adjournment motion is always in order.
Perhaps we should talk about
future agenda items.
future agenda items.
There's not an
We don't
item.
have it on here.
It's not on here. If you have them, please email them to me and I will bring them to the ad hoc agenda committee for consideration at the next meeting. But pretty much what we're looking at is everything that didn't get handled tonight and then some more new stuff.
And some
your
more new
budget.
stuff. And waste management.
So
Yeah.
everything that didn't get handled tonight, you mean things we're bringing back?
Yes, so we would be bringing back your applicants for arts and heritage. And then we would be bringing back the sheriff's contract. And then we would also have the
Budget.
HWMA and budget
Oh,
that
okay.
got bumped. The HWMA got bumped to your next meeting, so.
Can we try and have future agenda items on the next time?
Yes,
Great.
usually they don't usually appear on special meetings.
Okay.
Because you're not usually setting your regular meeting's agenda at your special meeting.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, no worries.
I would like to make a request that every agenda, even a special meeting agenda, has a space for council and staff reports and future agenda items.
It just seems like it gets confusing if we're doing reports twice a month.
But we don't have to do them, but as the fact that it's not on this agenda means we can't report out on anything that isn't on the agenda, and there's some items that we should be able to report out in a timely manner. And so if it doesn't appear on this agenda, then we're restricted to once a month being able to report things that we want to share with the public. So,
That's typically how that's done. Usually you don't use your special meetings for reporting out because they're not considered your regular meeting where you're likely to get the most attendance and audience participation, constituent participation. There's a reason we don't put these kinds of things on your special meetings.
right.
Okay.
Except that our special meetings aren't so special. They're kind of a regular thing.
Unfortunately for you guys, that's become true. However, it does not change the protocol of how this is usually handled.
It just brings
So,
us back to the need for just meeting twice a month. And
yeah, if you guys want to,
Bring some normalcy.
change how your council has, if you want to change and have 2 regular meetings per month, then we can,
Well,
address
I
that.
think there's a
Well,
potentially
let's
a
talk about
reason
it
to
another
do
time.
that.
We can't really have this conversation right now. I think
Which time?
we need to go ahead and wait. If you want to bring
Let's
up
put it on the agenda.
future
that
agenda,
we can't
items,
talk about.
well,
Let's
send
do
it to,
that.
send it to Danny, and then we'll try and
Yeah,
address
send
it.
me your agenda requests that I will make sure they get handled.
Can we get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? The public wish to comment on that? All those in favor?
It's been really special.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hey, you know, we